Here we go.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
Boy, can't hear you. Oy, oy, oy.
Can everybody hear me?
Oh, now I can.
Now you can hear me. Okay.
Now
Yeah, there were so many buttons here. I hit the wrong button. The whole thing shuts off. The fancier you get, the more problems you get. What is it? Marbin Chassan
Right.
Marbadaga, it's called. Okay. Next Tuesday, I will be. I'll be in New York. I'm going to New York for 2 days, so I won't be here next Tuesday. But in Mitzvah Shem, the Tuesday after, we should be fine. Okay. So we began this chapter. Chapter 3, with the 5 things that a person needs in order to be able to acquire Chachma. Then we spoke about, and there was 2 psukim each one of them. And then we spoke about last week a very what I think was a very important class, which we have spoken about the theme before, but was the concept of dealing with suffering and setbacks. And these are the 5 things were things that we needed in order to be able to acquire Chachma. But we also had to understand that the setbacks that we suffer are not necessarily punishments. The setbacks that we suffer are setbacks, and that we can't let things deter and stand in the way of what we're meant to be accomplishing. Then today, in Psukim Yud Gimel through Yud Ches, I feel it's like the greatest hits of Torah, of how great Torah is, that you're going to recognize as we start to learn through some of the psukim. Towards the end, you'll recognize many of the psukim. We recite them during our davening, during certain times, and they are and these are psukim that we live by. Okay, so the theme of today's shir and the theme of the psukim that we're going to deal with now is, and again we're dealing with psukim 13, verses 13 through 18, and we're dealing with the shevach, with the praise of Chachma, and the many gifts that it showers on us. Okay, so Pasuk Yud Gimel. Ashrei Adam, fortunate is the person, praiseworthy is the person that has matzah Chachma, that has found wisdom. Va'adam yafik tfuna, and a person who gives fork. Yafik means it comes from them, comes tivuna. So on the very simple level, you read the pasuk and it's a beautiful pasuk. The fortunate is the person, praiseworthy is a person who found Torah, and a person praiseworthy is a person who gives forth understanding. We have to understand, of course, why there's a difference between Chachma and Tivuna, and why we're saying that the Ashrei Adam who finds Chachma, and we separate that from an Adam who's Yafik Tivuna. So, how do you find Chachma? So I'm going to show you, in the most important lesson that perhaps somebody could give another person, I'm going to show you in an audio-visual kind of way how to find Chachma. Is everybody watching? That's how you find Chachma. I'll be more dramatic. Open your eyes. Open your eyes, and there isn't a thing not to learn from. In the past 2 days, I've had incredible experiences, but I couldn't write a book about them because they're not that incredible. But they were incredible experiences because I learned things from them, and I learned some very, very, very important lessons. I can't speak about them yet. I need a little passage of time, not for me, but for some of the people that happened to. I wouldn't want them to hear me talking about them, but they're nevertheless the amount of chachma, the amount of wisdom, the amount of understanding that I acquired and that they acquired from the events was really incredible. If you open your eyes, all we have to do is open our eyes, and we have chachma. We open our eyes, we say we believe in God. At the end of the day, The reason why we get all those things when we open our eyes is because we start to understand things. When you look at things and you bring them inside, you let the eyes be the windows to the soul, and you let those things that you're seeing touch your soul. So then there's an incredible amount of things that we have to learn. Once though, and therefore we say that a person, it's not just fortunate, but it's ashrei adam. It's praiseworthy is a person who's matzah chachma, because that means that a person's eyes are open and their heart is open, and they're listening to everything around them. They're watching everything around them. But it doesn't stop there, because v'adam yafik tfuna. Because the chachma that we receive will the chachma that we see will be yafik. It'll pour out of us. In other words, the more chachma that we acquire, so then the more it pours out of us. Chachma doesn't come. Everybody thinks that chachma comes from knowledge, from wisdom, from being smart. When you're smart, you can learn a lot of things. No, when you're open, you can learn a lot of things. It's not about being smart, and therefore, when you open your eyes, you have chachma. But once you have the chachma, now you have to apply the logic to it. Now you have to start doing something with that chachma. And when you apply the logic to that chachma, then it becomes tevuna, it becomes understanding. It becomes a deep understanding. And that's why it's in two stages. Asher Adam Matzah Chachma. You are praiseworthy for having the ability to be able to open your eyes and to cull knowledge. But you are not praiseworthy if you do nothing with it. It stops right there if you don't deepen it. Therefore, va'adam yafik tfuna. And it doesn't even say that a person has to work hard at it. Va'adam yafik. It's just going to pour out of a person that tevuna, that deeper understanding, if you apply your logic to it, if you start to think about and process the things that you see. Look, I can tell you a small part of it. This person who unfortunately lost a daughter in the past couple of days. It was a terrible tragedy, and I was sitting with them during Shiva, and it was just amazing to me how they were connecting the dots in a certain way, and they came to an understanding of who their daughter really was, and of what life sort of obscured that because of all any kinds of things, normal tensions and difficulties that took place. But he was able to connect dots and to see them. And I was watching the chachma he already had. He had all the information. He had all the events, all the information. He was there for everything. But now to take all of that and to process it, and then when you process it, they say like the penny drops, right? In other words, nafala asimun. All of a sudden the lights went on, and it became so crystal clear what the whole thing was about. And that's praiseworthy. Praiseworthy, and it's fortunate because a person who's able to do that, was able to connect dots in their lifetime and be able to see how or why and how things are happening. So then that can really answer a lot of things and give a person a lot of strength. Okay, Pasuk Yud Daled. Ki tov sachra mischar kasef. That it's schara is like doing business. So that the business that you do with it is better than the business that you do with silver. Torah business is more lucrative than silver. Yeah, I believe him, Shlomo Melech. Maybe for him, but I'm still trying to find that lucrative deal. You'll see in a second what Shlomo Melech means. We'll get there. But kitov sachar mischar kasef umecharutz tivuasa. Mecharetz tivuasa is that it is the tivuasa, the produce, right? The things that the fruit of Torah. So then that is even better than fine gold. Now, that seems to be a funny thing to compare it to gold and to silver. Why would we compare Torah to material things? Why not compare Torah to other spiritual pursuits, to things that angels are doing to God himself? Why are we comparing it to gold and silver? Because there's something very specific about gold and silver. That we know that when you do commerce with things, when you do schara, you do business with things. So I have an object, I sell you the object, I now have money, and you now have the object. But when we have Torah, so I have the Torah. I'm not saying me. The Rebbe has the deeper understanding of the Torah. The Talmud, the student, doesn't yet have that understanding. The Rebbe gives that understanding to the Talmud. It's not that the Rebbe gave it to the Talmud and the Talmud gave his attention and his love and his loyalty to the Rebbe. It's that both the Rebbe and the Talmud now both have that object. It's an amazing math. That I sell the object, so to speak. I give the object, and then now it's two objects in the world. It's not one object and money in the other person's hands. Is that now both of us have that, and not only do both of us have it, but actually the Rebbe has it now even stronger. Because the fact that the Rebbe, and when I say the Rebbe, every single person, when you tell this over to somebody, you learn something here and you tell it over to somebody, now they have that Torah. And you also have that Torah. It's not that you give it up to them, you have it also. But you don't have it also, you have it stronger. Because when you go over it, and you now have to process it in your own mind, you have to then assimilate it, you have to staple it inside, and now give it over to them. Now it becomes that it's not just two Torahs. Now it's three Torahs. In other words, it keeps growing exponentially. There's a tremendous Gemara. The Gemara says that there was a machlekas, there was a difference of opinion between two rabbis as to who made a greater contribution in the world. And one of them said that the Torah was about to be forgotten from the world. So he went and he taught Torah to many, many people. That's a beautiful thing. The other rabbi said that, well, what I did was I set traps, I caught deer, I then took the deer, shechted them, skinned them, worked the skins, I made klaf. Then on the klaf, I wrote, on the parchment, I wrote the book of Bereshis, then I wrote the book of Shmos, then I wrote the book of Vayikra, then the book of Bamidbar, then the book of Devarim. I then gave the book of Bereshis to a group of boys, and I told them to learn it. And I gave the book of Shmos to a group of boys, and I gave the book of Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim. And then when those groups of boys finished, they then took their book of Bereshis and taught the next group the book of Bereshis, and the boys with the book of Shmos then taught the other group the book of Shmos. And they did this amongst each other, and each one of them did 5 times, 6 times. They learned their book, and then they taught their book to the other groups. And in that way, I ensured that Torah wasn't going to be forgotten from the Jewish people. So you look at that Talmud and you say, wait a second, there's a fire is burning. What do you do when a fire is burning? You put it out. Yeah, you don't sit there and make calculations and cheshbainis and say, "Oh, I gotta go and I gotta shecht an animal. It's got to be 100% kosher, and then I gotta make the nets to catch the animal, and that has to be 100% kosher and no chil Shabbos, and I have to make sure this and this and this and this, and then we'll go and put out the fire." What are you doing? What are you doing? It's taking too long. So one of the explanations of that Gemara is that it was teaching us that foundations are critical. And therefore, to save Torah, you can't just throw, you can't just jump at it. The foundations that you lay are critical. But I'm not going in that direction. What I'm looking at in this Gemara is that every single one of those children had the ability to be able to not only know their Torah, but to know the other person's Torah also. And then by taking that and giving it over to somebody else, they now had, it was now strengthened. And that built a foundation, that built a guarantee that there was going to in fact be a continuation of Torah. Because when you do, so to speak, when you do business with Torah, what we're doing is strengthening Torah. We're not just passing around an object and passing around money on sort of 2 different tracks. But what we're doing is that we're taking the Torah and we're strengthening, we're making that Torah grow inside of every person because you're taking it and you're giving it. And that's why it's even better, ki toiv sachra mischa kesef. It's even better than the schar, than the business that you do with kesef, than you do with gold, with silver and with gold, because it doesn't just pass, it increases. Okay. Pasuk Tesvav 15. Yikorahi mipninim. it's even more precious than pearls. Again, with the jewelry, with the material things, gold, silver, pearls. But what didn't we get in pearls that we got in gold? What didn't we get in gold and silver that now we're getting in pearls? The kol chafetzecha lo yishvu ba, and all of your desires can't compare to it. So I think that it's really a continuation of that theme. When you have a pearl, and a pearl is a certain size, so it has a certain value. When that pearl increases in size, it doesn't, let's say it doubles in size, it doesn't double in value. It goes exponentially much greater. Because a pearl of X size is worth whatever, but a pearl that's bigger than that is that's almost like amazing. It's rare, and it becomes more rare and more unique. And because of that, it grows in value. The more, the Gemara says that a person who learns Torah 100 times and a person who learns Torah 101 times can't be compared to each other. The Gemara uses a pasuk, and the Gemara says, "V'shavtem ru'isem bein tzaddik l'rasha," that you will see the difference between a tzaddik, a righteous person, and a wicked person. Bein oved elokim, between somebody who serves Hashem, la'asher lo avado, to somebody who doesn't serve Hashem. So the Gemara then goes through examples of what a wicked person, a righteous person is, and what is a person who is an oved elokim and a person who is not oved elokim. And the Gemara says that eino don meshana pirko, you can't compare a person who learns 100 times to somebody who learns his learning 101 times. Which means that the Torah is calling a person that learns 101 times, it's calling him a person who is an Oved Elokim. And by extension, what are we calling a person that learns something only 100 times? Asher Loi Avdai. A person who didn't serve God. Yeah? Halavai. I should have gone over my things, my Torah, my learning 100 times. Guy who goes over his learning 100 times, but he doesn't make it to the 101st time, so we call him Asher Lo Yavadai? That's somebody who hasn't served God. It's just weird. It's hard to understand. So I'll tell you the way the rabbis understand it. The rabbis say that 100 times learning is fabulous. You go over something 100 times, that's really pretty amazing. But when you look at it and you say, I'm going to push myself one more time, the value of that push makes that learning go over the top. And that's called somebody who is an Oved Elokim, somebody who serves Hashem. In other words, when we put more effort into the things we do, we push just a little bit further, we go that one extra thing that we thought we would never be able to do, the value of the Torah that we just studied is that much greater. We learn in another place in Pirkei Avos, Lefum Tzara Agra. We learned this in Pirkei Avos together. Lefum Tzara Agra, that in commensurate with the amount of effort you put into something is the reward that you get for something. A person davens and is limited in their challenge. It's beautiful davening. But a person has a challenging day, challenging moment, and they push themselves to concentrate on their davening. The value of that davening is off the charts. A person who has any mitzvah that they're particularly challenged at that moment to be able to perform that mitzvah, when they perform that mitzvah, the schar, the reward that a person receives for that is incredible. And that's what it means when it says Yikarahi mipninim, that when we hold on to Torah, and when we work with Torah, when we learn Torah, when we're involved in Torah, when we're living Torah, so then that Torah is yakar. It's more valuable than pninim, because every time we put in a little more effort into it, so then the value increases. We have this concept also when we talk about the number of people that do a mitzvah. We have an idea that's called Berov Am Hadras Melech, that in the majority of the people is in the multitude of the people is the glory to the king. which means that the more people that gather together to do a mitzvah, so then that gives an energy to the mitzvah, and it gives an honor to Hashem. Because one person that does a mitzvah is beautiful. 10 people that do a mitzvah is not 10 times that person. 10 people that do that mitzvah is hundreds of times, because the energy that people add starts to grow exponentially. Look, you know it. You go to shul, and we're not looking for crowds and we're not looking for numbers. But you go to shul, it's quiet Shabbos, there's the same few people that are there. It's great, it's a beautiful davening, it's wonderful. But then you get a Shabbos where you have, guests from all over the place, and there's just everybody who could comes, and the energy is incredible. Because we feed off of each other, and we add an incredible energy. And that's what Shlomo Melech is telling us about Torah, that it's like peninim. It's like the value of something that doesn't just double or triple, but that it grows exponentially. And the more of it we have, it's not just that we have double or triple the amount of Torah, but it starts to grow into an incredible, with incredible depth. Okay, v'kol chavetzecha lo yishvu ba. And then he says that all the things that you desire aren't equal to the worth of the chachma. What does that mean? V'kol chavetzecha lo yishvu ba. So we want things either because they're unique and special, right? We like to collect things, we like to acquire things, or we acquire things for the most simple reason, which is because we need them. By the Torah, it has both things. The Torah is rare and unique, and the Torah is also a need for us. And therefore, because it has both things, usually things are one or the other. They're either rare or we need it. By the Torah, it has both of those things. And therefore, it's more valuable and unequal to any other chayfetz, any other thing that we desire in this world, any other thing that we want to acquire in this world. But I think it's saying something else. V'kol chafatzecha lo yishvu ba. The things that you treat as valuable can't compare to anything in the world. To anything in the world. You know what my most valuable item is? What I know my kids are going to beat each other for when I die? It ain't my money. Right? I know they're going to, and I have to try to figure out a way to make sure this doesn't happen, but I know that there's going to be a machlokes in my family. Machlokes is going to be about my Haggadah. My Haggadah. It's silver. It's beautiful Haggadah. It's got silver plate on it. Silver plate. It's worth nothing. It's a Schick Haggadah. I don't know if you know that. Familiar with Arthur Schick, who was an artist. A beautiful Haggadah. But I've been using that Haggadah for at the moment 48 years. 49 years. I got a Haggadah from my grandmother and my bar mitzvah. And every single Pesach, now remember I'm an American, which means 49 times 2. So it's 48 times 2, because last year we only had one. But that every Pesach, that Haggadah is lovingly placed on the table. It is the most valuable possession that is in our home. My kids, every time they look at it, it's like a Jewish Rorschach test, because there's so much wine spilt on those pages that have made these little patterns. You have to look at it and see, what you see inside of those patterns. There's matzah, that's probably 40-year-old matzah, that's embedded inside of the pages, but it's got a beauty of a Mesorah. I have svarim from my grandfather who brought them from Europe, who got them from his generations previous to him. And I have a few of those, I don't have many, but I have a few of those svarim. And those to my kids, those are prized possessions. I have a sefer from the Chafetz Chaim. One of the svarim the Chafetz Chaim wrote, an original printing that the Chafetz Chaim himself had touched, because inside the sefer is printed the word muga, which means that it was checked by the Chafetz Chaim to make sure that everything was in order. That's what he used to do to his svarim. So this was an original copy that the Chafetz Chaim himself had touched. Now, I know that there's a market for rare books and things, but take my Haggadah and show that to somebody who doesn't appreciate that. That is the nastiest, oldest, rattiest looking book. That's no value. You show them a book, a faded ancient book. It's a faded ancient book. You can't really use it. But to us, it's the most precious thing because it carries with it something much deeper than just the monetary value. The things that you hold are valuable, the rest of the world doesn't hold valuable. You know, the leichter that you got from your grandmother, or the leichter that you got when you got married, that now if it was silver, that it's a little faded, maybe a little dented, maybe it's, we have one candlestick that came from Europe, from my grandparents in Europe. That thing's been through, it's been around the block and beyond. It's beat up and it's dented and it's traveled to who knows how many countries. But the beauty of it, because it represents not just a Shabbos candle, but it represents our history. Nobody else sees that kind of value in these things. Your Shabbos dishes, which are dear to you, that have little cracks and little chips, those things are worth billions. You try to sell that kind of stuff, you won't get anything for it. Because what we see as valuable, they don't see as valuable. Mezuzah. Mezuzah to us is something that has an incredible value, has really unlimited value. Imagine you ask a Jew and a non-Jew to produce something of value. And we pull out a mezuzah, and they pull out, a Rolex watch. And you look at it and you say, wait a second, you're making a big mistake. My mezuzah is worth much more than your Rolex watch. Because what do you got to do for your Rolex watch? You got to keep it in a safe deposit box. You got to put it in a safe. You got to watch it and protect it. And what do I do with my mezuzah? I put it on my door and it protects me. What a beautiful thought. That's the value of mezuzah. I don't need to protect it. It sits there and it watches over me. We have to recognize, and Shlomo Melech wants us to make sure that we recognize that the value of things is not about its money. It's not about its market value. It's not about its blue book value. The value of things kol chafetzecha, the things that you desire, the things that you value, the things that you look at and you say, these are critical to my life, lo yishvu bo. Had a conversation with a boy recently. He was packing to go to Poland, whatever. He was packing, so he said they were davening. They weren't davening during the trip. In other words, once they landed, they would daven. So he said, "Where should I put my tefillin? So where should I put my tefillin? Should I put my tefillin in my suitcase, which is going to be checked, or should I put my tefillin in my carry-on luggage?" But he didn't really need it in his carry-on luggage because they were davening before they got on the plane, so they didn't need it. So his Rabbi said to him, well, "What kind of question is it? You never put that inside of your luggage. That's your most prized possession. Next to your wife and kids, that's it, and not your house. It's the wife and kids, and then it's your tefillin. The tefillin stay with you at all times. That's, of course, in your carry-on. It's in the closest to you. The value has nothing to do with money. They are pretty expensive, but that's a separate issue. But it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with what it represents. And that's what Shlomo Melech, with all of these monetary things, he wants us to understand these words, Kol chafetzecha lo yishuv bo, that you have to know what real value is. Okay, Pasuk Tezayin, Orech Yomim biyamina. The Torah is an Orech Yomim, its length of days biyamina in your right hand, Bismola, when it's in your left hand, it's Osher v'Kavod. Now, Orech Yomim, length of days, that sounds a little spiritual, something to do maybe with the world to come. Osher v'Kavod, wealth and honor. That sounds like something that has to do more in this world. Now, rabbis tell us that Orech Yomim biyamino, when it's in the right hand we know is the hand of God, that's when Torah is studied lishma, for its purest sake. When it's bismola, when you've got a little bit of an agenda, some ulterior motives, some other plan of why Torah is important and valuable and enjoyable, so then it's Osher v'Chavod. It'll give you something, but it's not going to give you something as eternal as when you learn it lishma. And again, Shlomo Melech wants us to understand the value of Torah and the value of learning Torah purely. The value of learning Torah because you know it's going to touch your neshama and you know that you're going to grow from it, and that's the reason why you're learning it, so that gives you Orech Yomim. Orech Yomim carries with it Osher v'Chavod. It carries with it wealth and honor. It carries every blessing with it. But when it's just for the sake of knowledge, the sake of information, the sake of doing something valuable, but not really doing something eternal, so then it still gives you Osher v'Chavod. It gives you a wisdom. It gives you an understanding. It gives you an ability to be able to make a good life for yourself. But it's just limited. It doesn't have that same kind of eternality as when you do it lishma. You do it biyamino with your right hand with all your strength. And now the final two psukim. Diracheh darchei noam, its ways are ways of pleasantness, v'chol nesivoseh shalom, and all of its byways are peace. So we've got two problems with it. My first problem is, what is the bread and butter of our Judaism? Machlokes, right? Arguments. One rabbi holds this way, one rabbi holds this way. That's on every page of the Talmud. Everything is about machlokes. Everything about is resolving a machlokes. Everything is about, deciding which way we paskin. Do we paskin? Do we follow this way? Do we follow that way? There are all kinds of different opinions. We say a line. We say Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. They increase peace in the world. Yeah, they increase fighting in the world, and I don't mean bad fighting, but there just seems to be so many different opinions, so many divergent ways of doing Judaism. How does that make peace? Because they're marbim shalom ba'olam, because what they do is that they show us the way to go. Now, granted, there are many different paths now that we don't have central Torah Judaism, we don't have a central Torah leader, but nevertheless, by clarifying for their communities, by clarifying for their students, by clarifying for their kihilos, so then that's marbim shalom ba'olam, that's being peace into the world. It's making sure that we understand, we make shalom, we make whole the pieces of Torah. Now, I can make it whole in one way, another rabbi can make it whole in another way, but as long as I know that what you're doing is whole, and what you're doing is perfect, then it might not be my way of doing it, but it's marbim shalom ba'olam. It's an amazing thing. Kitnios. I have no problem with the fact that Sfarim eat kitnios on Pesach. I don't eat kitnios on Pesach. Many Sfarim have a real problem with that. That the Ashkenazim are doing something, they feel like they're doing something ridiculous. Why are you doing that? I always wonder, why does that bother you? And many people will look at it and say, we need another machlokas in Judaism, that some people will do it and some people don't do it. We need another thing that separates us. Yeah, because it's beautiful. What it does is it clarifies us. I'm an Ashkenazi, you're a Sephardi. I'm serving God in my way, you're serving God in your way, and we're both doing exactly the same thing. When I felt this the most, it must have been 32 years ago. I had an opportunity to go to Paris for a Shabbos. It was a crazy thing. At that point in my life, I hadn't traveled anywhere. Somebody in my congregation, which was very tiny at the time, had tickets to Paris. They couldn't go. They wanted us to go. So they sent us away for a Shabbos. We had little babies. Our parents didn't live there. The whole thing was like a crazy thing. 5 days we went to Paris. And Friday night, there happened to have been a boy in my community who married a girl from, not in my community, a boy in San Diego who married a girl from Paris. And somebody put me on to him. I spoke with him. He was learning in a kollel in Paris. And he said, listen, you call my in-laws and you'll go to them for Shabbos. Okay, great. Called the in-laws. We set it up. Everything was going to be amazing. We were davening in a shul on Rue Pavée, which is a Jewish street. It was an incredibly beautiful shul from before the war. And it had a Rav, a Chassidish Rav, by the name of Rav Rottenberg. He had a yeshiva of Bali Tshuva. They were all Sfardim. There was Sfardim that sort of, looked like Ashkenazim, but they were, they looked like yeshiva boys. Those black hats and everything. And the davening was unbelievable. As a matter of fact, in the middle of davening, we had just gotten to Paris on Friday afternoon. I fell asleep in the middle of Chadaidi. So, and I woke up when everybody turns around during L'Chadodi, and they say, Boi Chala, and I got the whole shul facing me. Now, everybody had known that there was, a young American rabbi that was visiting for Shabbos. I'm thinking, what do they think of me now? As I was out cold, and then I woke up and I see everybody's like, hello, how you doing? Shalom Aleichem. It was just the weirdest thing. But I did not understand one word. People were talking to me, and they were saying, and I'm not a word, even though I do know one phrase, je ne parle pas français, or je parle français un peu. That's the one thing I know. I learned that in 12th grade or in 11th grade in high school. I didn't know anything, and they're talking to me. I'm thinking, how am I going to make it through a Shabbos meal? The people that we were going to, they were French, they were Bali Tshuva, so they had no Hebrew, and they had no Yiddish. Now, I don't have Yiddish either, but I could have faked it. But Hebrew I could have gotten somewhere with. Nothing. They had nothing. So sitting at the table, and they had a deaf daughter. We had a great time communicating with her. That was much better. But with the rest of the family, we couldn't communicate with them until they started to talk Divrei Torah. And when they started to talk Divrei Torah, there was Moshe, and there was Aaron, and there was Torah, and there was HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the words were exactly the same. And though I couldn't understand all the nuances, I knew that I was home. I knew that I was in a place that we were totally and completely connected, and that we were totally one. That's the amazing beauty of Torah, that it's the thing that unifies us completely. Because I've got my Torah. I've got my way of living. I've got my language. They've got their way of living. They've got their language. But our Torah is exactly the same. Now, their minhagim Friday night were different. My minhagim were different. But we were all keeping Shabbos. We were all doing the same thing. That's what it means that Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. They bring peace within their context. They make things whole and they make things beautiful. And therefore, in its tapestry and in its difference, it's really one beautiful whole thing. Dirachah darchinoam, its ways are ways of pleasantness, v'chol nesivosah shalom, and everything is whole. With all of its different pieces, it's really one shalom. It's one whole thing. But I'll tell you another important lesson from this pasuk. That Torah is meant to bring us a sense of pleasantness. When it doesn't, when we feel anxious about it, when we feel that it's not comfortable, when we feel that these ideas of the Torah seem to run, they make me uncomfortable, they're not smooth for me, that means that I'm doing something wrong. Because by definition, there's no anger in Torah, there's no discomfort in Torah, there is none of that in Torah, because its ways are ways of pleasantness, and when they're not pleasant to us, that means we're doing it in the wrong way. And then finally, it's a tree of life to those who hold on to it, and v'chol nesivoseha, and v'somcheha miushar, and the people that support it are praiseworthy. 2 weeks from now, I'll talk about this pasuk in the context of the parsha. I realize that in 2 weeks from now, this week is Toldos. Next week is Vayetze. Yes, in 2 weeks from now we'll talk about this. Okay. So these psukim presented to us the shevach, the praise, and the understanding of the beauty and the value of Torah, and that in truth there is not a thing in the world that is as valuable and as important to us as the Torah is. Okay, my thoughts. Everybody should have a beautiful, wonderful, amazing week.
Quickly,
Yes.
About languages.
Yeah.
Christians worldwide have largely banished Latin from the masses,
Right.
whereas a Jew, in most cases, can go anywhere in the world to shul to daven, and he'll find a Hebrew siddur with services run in Hebrew,
Right.
which is a wonderful advantage, quote unquote, or just a wonderful possibility that we have compared to a Catholic or a Christian who goes from country to country and doesn't understand anything that's going on during Mass.
Right. That's right. As soon as, I have to be honest, as soon as I heard them sing Lecha Dodi, that's when I calmed down. Because, my Lecha Dodi, their Lecha Dodi, different tunes, but it's exactly the same thing. Boi Kala, we're both welcoming in Shabbos. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a beautiful, beautiful day, a beautiful week. And Mirza Hashem, we'll see everybody not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after.
Thank you. Nasiya Tova.
Okay, thank you very much.